We've all been waiting to see what was going to happen with Eternals. A lot was riding on this movie for Marvel. It needs to make over $400 million just to recoup costs and not be a complete failure. But the critic scores for this movie are abysmal at this point on Metacritic, IMDb, and even Rotten Tomatoes. But the audience scores are finally out, and there's a lot of divide about this movie. I want to read some of the reviews, and I also want to read this article. But before we get into the topic at hand, if you enjoy the content that I create, please make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell. Follow me on social media like Twitter or mine so that you can see when my content is posted. And if you do really enjoy the videos and the live streams that I create, please consider becoming a Dark Titan via Patreon for just $1 a month or supporting via memberships. All of the links are in the description, and of course, I do really appreciate all of the support. So this is the Wrap article, and it says Eternals energizes box office with 71 million opening. There's good news and bad news for Marvel Studios' Eternals. The good news is that despite having the weakest reviews in franchise history, the Chloe Zhao blockbuster has posted a strong opening weekend of $71 million from over 4,000 locations. Now, making right around 70 million on opening weekend isn't that bad. It looks like the number will wrap up to be right around the predicted range because the projection was 70 to 100 million, but keep in mind the projection was actually lowered by almost half because originally they were expecting it to make around 150 during the opening weekend, which doesn't look like it's going to happen. But it says it's a few notches down from the 75 million 3-day opening for Shang-Chi, but Eternal sits just above the 70 million opening of F9 to stand as the 4th highest opening weekend this year. I think everyone expected Eternals to be pretty successful. It's a Marvel movie. There's people that will go and see Marvel movies no matter what the content is, so it's not surprising to hear it's got a great opening weekend. It says it's also enough to push overall grosses back above 100 million for the 4th time since the start of October. A benchmark theaters are hoping to consistently clear as they aim to make Q4 2021 the first profitable quarter for exhibitors since the pandemic began. It does go on to talk about the review scores, though, saying the bad news, of course, is the reception, along with a 48% critic score and an 81% audience score on Rotten Tomatoes. Eternals is the first MCU film to see its cinema score grade sink to a B. The previous franchise low was a B+ for Thor in 2011, a grade that was also earned by Let There Be Carnage and the Suicide Squad this year. So yes, even though it is making money right now, we are seeing pretty mixed and divided reviews for the film. Obviously, week 2 is going to be very telling. For Eternals, week 1, of course, everyone that wants to see it is going to see it. Usually, opening weekends are pretty good, but next weekend will kind of be very telling to see, are people going to see it for a second time? How many people are going after they see these initial reviews from audiences and also critics? But if we go over to Metacritic, right now it's sitting at a pretty bad score. It's sitting at a 53 based on 59 critic reviews and a 6.4 out of over 500 user reviews. These are not positive scores. This doesn't look very good for Eternals. And a lot of the users and critics are saying the same thing about Eternals, and there's quite a few reasons why people don't like this film. Now, obviously, there are a lot of 5 stars and 10 out of 10s. A lot of people do like Eternals. They thought that it was a really, really great cinematic movie. They thought it was beautiful. Some of the shots were amazing. The character development was good. But if you get to some of the more mixed reviews, everyone's saying the same thing. It's slow, it's boring, there's too many characters, there's not enough time to make a great movie out of the content that is there. The mixed reviews are saying things like, I enjoyed my time with the new cast of characters, but I couldn't help feeling as though most were underdeveloped and most were underutilized. The narrative felt like it had too much exposition in some sections, but felt polar opposite in others. That was a 6. Someone gave it a 5 and said I was really excited for this movie and went to see it with good expectations, but nothing went as expected. Script was loose and screenplay was very shattered. There were problems with editing also. Direction felt weak, didn't seem like it was directed by Oscar winner directors. Story was weak and childish, and it looked like it was too much added to the movie. This could have easily been a two-part movie. A lot of people are saying this, that while yes, some of the content that's here was decent, it was too short. You know, you can't fit all of these characters and all of their backstories into a 2.5-hour film. Now, I personally just haven't seen what's supposed to be exciting about Eternals. I like Richard Madden, I like Angelina Jolie, I don't specifically hate any of the other main actors, but the marketing was boring, the characters seem dull, and there's way too many of them, and I give them credit for trying something new and trying to go in a more raw and emotional direction, but there's way too many characters and way too much story crammed into a 2.5-hour movie. It's the same type of deal with Dune. If Dune maybe was an hour longer, you know, the story could have been better, everything in the small details could have been more fleshed out, and it kind of seems the same for Eternals. I know they try to keep movies to like a 2.5-hour film, and all the content shoved into a 2.5-hour movie because, of course, they want to show it on the big screen. They want people to go and enjoy it, not be sitting there for 4 hours watching a film. But at the same time, I think that some movies just need to be longer, and it seems like Eternals definitely needed that. Somebody gave it a 4. MCU Phase 4 really has been a total bust for Marvel, and the streak of flops continues. First Black Widow, then Shang-Chi, and now Eternals. Some people say Eternals is like a DC film, far from it actually. Fact is, Eternals still acts like a typical MCU movie. The problem is that the same formula we've seen since Phase 2 when the company was bought out by Disney, and people are just getting tired of it now. And I do think that that's a problem, that people are getting sick and tired of this formula. People are getting bored of seeing the same thing over and over, and I think that they did try to go in a slightly different direction with Eternals, but it just didn't turn out as well as they expected. Going over to IMDb right now, the user ratings are sitting at a 6.9 stars out of 10. Lots of positives here, but also a lot of mixed, lots of 7s, 6s, even 1s. 10% of the reviews are actually 1s. And then we go over to Rotten Tomatoes, and there's been a lot of talk about this Rotten Tomatoes score right now, just because we've seen it stay pretty steady. It started at an 86% for the audience score, and it has over the weekend dropped to an 81. I personally think it's going to stop around a 75, and we're going to see Eternal sit around a 75, but the critic scores have gotten super low. They started at a 57%, now they're down to a 47%. I don't know if this is going to stop. I'm sure most of the critics who wanted to put out their reviews have at this point, but I'm sure we'll see it drop a little bit more, but a 47% isn't good, and definitely isn't what Marvel expected from this film, I'm sure. Headed on over to the audience scores. It seems like a lot of people either love it or they hate it. There's lots of 5 stars and people saying the movie's epic, it's amazing, it's beautiful, it's fantastic. And then the other side is just like, yeah, it wasn't a bad base of a story, but every detail about this film just wasn't good. On top of these problems, for people going into this that were somewhat familiar with Jack Kirby's characters, what we got weren't the characters of the original source material. They were twisted around with race and gender swaps, which people also don't like. People are saying things like a brilliant movie and cast. Clearly the movie's purpose is to establish Eternal's place in the Marvel Universe. All the dialogue helped fulfill that purpose in one way or another. You will have a chance to get to know each character on an individual level. Action scenes were beautifully crafted. The first sequence of violence was jolting. They maintained a level of suspense with a group of powerful characters like the Eternals. And then, of course, you see the more negative reviews. It was a good setup movie as it introduced the characters and their abilities. However, it didn't necessarily capture my attention like Avengers. In the Avengers movies, I felt like I would miss something if I got up and went to the bathroom. In this movie, I got up and came back without much concern. Now, a lot of people are raising the question, why don't people like Eternals? It's just like Avengers, because there's a lot of characters, but the difference is that with Eternals, these are all new characters, so they're shoving all of their stories into one movie, expecting you to remember everything and learn about each character. And with Avengers, yes, they got together in the Avengers movies, but they all had their own separate movies, for the most part, and that's the difference, is that you already knew the characters going into it. You already had their backstories, you saw their origins, but with Eternals, it's like, yeah, here's a bunch of different characters that you know nothing about. Hopefully you like the movie, and it just isn't sitting well with a lot of people. I say it all the time, but I don't want movies to come out and have them be bad. I want content to come out. I want it to be amazing. I want people to love new movies, TV shows, games, entertainment in general. But unfortunately, it just seems like Eternals isn't going as well as Marvel expected. Half a star here from a verified user 1 hour ago. Absolutely the biggest Marvel disappointment. Hollywood once again pushing their agendas, unnecessary sexual contact, the sex scene is obvious. I personally don't care if there's a sex scene in a movie, it doesn't bother me any, but this person said it just kind of seemed awkward. Someone else gave it a 1 star and said sad, disappointing movie. Premise of a bloody, uncaring god running everything is sad. The people in the movie are unlikable or tragic. Also, suicide should never be the answer to life's problems. I am also tired of the idea that a man could not have done amazing things he has done without alien help. People saying the story wasn't great. A 1 star, not very original or entertaining. 2 hours of my life I can never get back. And then there's like 4 stars, 3 stars. The story's too complicated. There are too many moving parts. It was well acted, but the characters get lost. It's a shame that Eternals came out and it's just not as good as everyone wanted it to be. Again, I want movies to come out and have them be amazing, but it seems like Eternals needed way more time. Maybe they should have only shown half the characters in a part 1 and then the other half of characters in a part 2 and kind of merge their stories in the second half. But of course, Marvel didn't want to do that. They wanted to release a 2.5-hour movie with a bunch of characters so that they could make some money off of it. We've seen Marvel dominate for years now, but it looks like this movie just isn't that much of a hit. Yes, it is getting some good reviews, but if you go back to other websites, besides Rotten Tomatoes, if you look at IMDb and Metacritic, it's just getting pretty mixed user reviews right now. Like I said, it started at an 86% on Rotten Tomatoes, it's now dropped to an 80%, and everywhere else it's got really poor review scores. But that's all that I really had to talk about in this video. Let everyone know your thoughts in the comment section down below. If you enjoyed it, please make sure to give it a like, share it, and subscribe to the channel. And of course, if you didn't, make sure to give it a dislike. I appreciate your support either way, but I will talk to you all again in the next video really soon.